Have you ever had a moment of clarity about your life and immediately panicked about what it meant you would have to do? That panic is one of the most common reasons people shut down their own honesty before it has had a chance to help them. In this video, I'm going to show you why honesty and catastrophe are not the same thing, how the integrity wheel maps the difference between collapse and discernment, and what becomes possible once you can separate those two things. Hi, I'm Jessica. What this often feels like is panic the second clarity comes in. You begin to see that something in your life no longer fits the way it used to. And instead of feeling relieved that you finally named it, you feel trapped. Because now it seems like honesty comes with a price tag. The minute you admit your work no longer fits, or your relationship feels off, or the life you built belongs to an older version of you, your mind rushes ahead to the ending. You think, so now what? Do I quit? Leave? End it? Start over? And that is where a lot of people freeze, not because they're unclear, because they assume that clarity commits them to demolition. If the only options feel like pretending or detonating, most people will keep pretending. And that makes complete sense. But it is not the only way forward. And here is the thing that keeps most people stuck in that choice. Most people have never been shown a third option. They have been taught to think in extremes, and that is exactly what the integrity wheel helps interrupt. If that exact kind of panic sounds familiar, please take a moment and tap the like button. It helps this reach people who are trying to be honest without turning their life into a crisis. Here is why this happens. A lot of people have been taught to think in those extremes. Either stay grateful and make peace with what is not working, or make one bold move and call it courage. But most real life does not move that way. That is part of what the integrity wheel helps make visible. Summer is the season of building, the role, the structure, the commitments, the outer life. Autumn is different. Autumn is not asking you to perform better. It is asking you to reckon honestly with what is true now and what can no longer be carried the same way. And that matters because autumn does not ask you to detonate your life. It asks you to see clearly, assess honestly, and stop forcing what already feels false. That is a completely different task. What I see in my practice is that people often confuse discernment with collapse, and they are not the same thing. Collapse is driven by urgency. It says, I cannot tolerate this tension anymore. I need immediate relief. Discernment is steadier. It says, something here is not right. I'm going to tell the truth carefully enough to see what is actually mine to change. For example, a client might realize that the career they have spent 15 years building no longer fits who they are. The collapse response is to quit on a Tuesday with no plan. The discernment response is to stop pretending the job is fine, get honest about what specifically is not working, and make one small, deliberate move. Maybe a conversation, maybe a boundary, maybe a quiet decision to stop performing enthusiasm they no longer feel. That is a slower approach, but it is far more accurate. Because not every truth requires a dramatic decision. Very often, the first truth is simply this: I cannot keep relating to this part of my life as if nothing has changed. That is already movement. And to be clear, there are situations where urgent change really is necessary. Sometimes people are unsafe. Sometimes structure is really ending. Sometimes the environment is toxic. Sometimes staying creates real harm. But that is not the only kind of truth. A lot of the time, the first honest step is not leaving. It is ending the performance, stopping the inner argument, and letting yourself see what you already know. without demanding an immediate answer. And here is the part that changes everything. The fear was never really about the truth. The fear was about what you thought the truth would make you do. And once you can separate those two things, something opens up. So here's the shift. Telling the truth about your life does not require you to blow it up. It requires you to stop protecting what is no longer true just because it used to be. And that is different, because once you understand that, you no longer have to choose between denial and destruction. There is another way through. You can get more honest without becoming more dramatic. You can notice what feels false before forcing a decision about it. You can let the reality of your life show you what needs to change, instead of demanding a final answer before you are ready. It's not avoidance, but that is discernment. And for a lot of people, that is the first time honesty has ever felt possible, because the real fear was never truth. The real fear was what you thought truth would make you do. Once that fear softens, you can think again. If this framework is helping you make sense of where you are, consider subscribing. We publish new videos 2 to 3 times a week, and this is the work we explore together. Here's the takeaway. A lot of suffering comes from treating clarity like a threat. You notice something is off, and before the truth has even finished landing, your mind is already writing the disaster script. So of course you pull back, go quiet, and tell yourself it's not that bad. But the alternative is not catastrophe. Very often, the alternative is simply becoming more honest about where you are. It may be the admission that something has changed, or that you are staying loyal to something that no longer fits, or that a role, a rhythm, or an expectation belongs to a version of your life that is already behind you. That does not call for a 5-alarm response. It calls for enough steadiness to stay with what you know long enough for the next right move to become visible. You do not have to force the ending just because you finally told the truth. Very often, the first mature move is smaller than that, cleaner than that. It is the moment you stop lying to yourself about what is no longer working. That is where real change begins. I want to hear from you in the comments. Where in your life do you feel pressure to make a dramatic move, when what you may honestly need first is an honest read? Tell me in the comments. These conversations matter to me, and they shape what I make next. In the next episode, I'm going to answer the question this video almost always raises. If I'm not blowing it up, where do I actually start? That video is called Start Here When You Don't Know What Comes Next, and it's the best place to go next. It'll be on your screen here. This work matters. You matter. And I'll see you in the next one.